Hello everyone, it's me from the cave again. Thought I'd just share my awakening experience because it's probably the most incredible thing that you can experience outside of birth and death, which is an illusion. But so is reality in of itself, and that's really what the awakening is sort of an awakening of this phantasmagoria, as they like to say in these esoteric traditions. At first, it very much seems like everything is just out there, like there's the sea, there's the sand, there's some rocks, and that I'm all in here. And so what I realised 8 years ago when I turned 30 was that actually I'm already out there. In fact, I'm everywhere. That's just basically temporarily, locally distorting this fabric of space and time to make it seem like I'm just here. So this becomes really interesting for many different reasons. But 8 years ago, I was, sitting in my room on my own, listening to a video by a man named Robert Lanza, who has a book called Biocentrism, and he was, doing a presentation actually in front of a few people. And he was just making some basic metaphysical statements. And up to the few years running up to this, my late 20s, I was always questioning some things. I was growing increasingly disillusioned about society first and foremost. But I was also interested in, started becoming very interested in philosophy. Not necessarily spirituality yet, but I knew that all the time I was a deep thinker. And, sometimes at night I would go to bed and I would sort of like be falling asleep, and I'd suddenly have this this moment of like, it would hit me that I'm going to die, and it was like this very sort of strong sensation, like something was being stimulated in me, and I didn't really know what it was at the time. And it just, I was always questioning, how can it be that I'm just here now? How can it be that I'm not going to exist ever again? Because when you're wrapped up in the illusion, it becomes very, very bizarre, the concept. Like I used to just watch a lot of football, be going to the pub, be going to some raves, going out on the weekend, living for the weekend really, because I hated my job so much. And that was, I think, suffering seems to some extent be a prerequisite for awakening, because so many people who are high on life are still at that stage of their evolution. They're still, like how I was in my perhaps early 20s and teenage years, just very much besotted by all the things I can do, the people I can see, and all the sports and all the gigs and festivals, all that kind of stuff. But then, just a few years down the line, when I'm turned 30, in my Saturn return, I was listening to this guy Robert Lanza, and he was just saying things like, like the sky is only blue when you look at it. Grass is only green when you look at it. You could do some genetic engineering, and those things would be a totally different colour. And he was just explaining things like in this way, and at one point it just hit me like a lead balloon. It just really struck straight through me like a lightning bolt, and I actually just like automatically pushed my laptop and sat up almost like a frightened cat. In fact, if I can find that image, I'll put it up here. It's pretty much exactly like that. Like I think I sort of was. It's sort of like being frightened by a ghost. That's probably the most I can think of it, or just not necessarily a ghost, but like anything where it jumps out at you and that sensation that you have. It was like that, and I've always given the analogy of it being like a balloon burst. And actually, I was watching a video by Sadhguru the other day, and he gave quite a nice analogy for us being so caught up with this idea of like, this is my bubble, this is your bubble. But when the bubble bursts, we don't say this is my air and this is your air. And so I suppose in a way this awakening is sort of like the envelope of your soul being sort of dissipated back into what I think of as the infinite sea of creation. We're kind of swimming around in mind. You want to think of it as in a more liquid form, like I'm here by the beach right now. So, often that analogy works quite nicely, doesn't it? Us being a drop in the ocean, but also an ocean in the drop. And so I was like also listening to people like Alan Watts and various different philosophers, and a lot of these philosophers have become what Heidegger would call Das Ein, which is the enlightened, illuminated soul, the person who is pierced through the illusion of matter. And this material universe has been transcended somewhat by what we think of as the alchemical wedding, and all of the historical images in the early Egyptians and the Sumerians. They all had a full grasp of this scientifically, I feel. Spirituality wasn't thought of as this sort of like distant, amorphic, sort of like heady thing. It was very much grounded in science, and they understood the metaphysical nature of reality. And I feel like now we're actually starting to gradually pull back towards that. If you're familiar with the Yuga cycle and how we're coming out of the Kali Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, the Treta Yuga, then the Satchit Ananda, right, the Satya Yuga. And as that happens, as some people say that's because we're pulling closer towards the light of Sirius, that's speculation, because I'm not entirely sure that is indeed the case of what causes this. But I feel like as that happens, you're going to get more and more of an awakening in souls, which are essentially space-time distortions of the universal mind itself. So like all of this stuff that I'm talking about prior to my awakening would have never even entered my head. But once that balloon is burst, you really are now floating around, and quite literally in some respects, if you consider lucid dreams and how I feel like people used to be able to explore space, which was through the astral planes and by leaving their body behind, because you aren't your body, right? And that's, I think, one of the first things you realize when you do have an awakening, is that you have fingers, you have a nose, you have eyes, but we don't say you are your eyes, we don't say you are your ears, and so on and so forth. Like, you're not your wallet, right? You're not your cardigan or whatever. So you're not your body, so what are you? Well, your mind. And mind is universal. All is mind, the universe is mental. You start becoming interested in Hermetic philosophy, you start becoming interested in what we call the occult, and like just general studies in line with Gnosticism, Sufism, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, even, which these things are essentially originally positive, and they've been inverted by this force that's unfortunately hijacked our planet and has manipulated us for a long time now, and that's why we live in this upside down world. But another analogy for an awakening could be said to be that of like a clenched fist. So if you clench your fist really hard now, to the point where suddenly you now become aware of your fist being a separate entity almost, whereas before you weren't really thinking about it. And so this contracted state of awareness is what happens when mind gets tangled up in matter, which are opposite conditions, the same thing. But as you sort of evaporate your mind through typical right brain visualizations, what we call mostly meditation, you begin to loosen that grip, and it becomes back to the more holistic sense of non-duality that actually was there from the outset before your incarnation. And so this is why the more you can't get out of your head, the more trapped you feel, the more depressed you feel, the more incarcerated we feel by our thoughts and our mind. And that's why going out to the beach and being in nature, is so important for us. We need to be doing this on our own, to get away from people who are also sheeple, by and large, who are going to, they show you this in the Truman Show, like, when you're talking to someone, it's pulling your attention back into a very local sense. And attention is narrow perception, as Alan Watts said. And it's perception that's actually going to allow you to evolve. So, in a few hours, the sun will go down, and there'll be infinity surrounding all of us. But how many people actually look up and even contemplate, in that point, their existence, and how this mystery has come to be? Instead, we're so focused on the bills and the rent and this and that, and then this video and this video, all the fleeting stuff I was talking about with media, which is here to distract us. So, we need to spend a lot more time on our own if we're going to actually evolve to a higher level of awareness. Or perhaps you already sort of like have a, certain mental fortitude or spiritual awareness, spiritual immune system of sorts, that, you can get away with your meditative principles and practices in cities, and you don't necessarily have to go out into nature, and at which point you know, that's great. We now need to go forwards and start sharing how other people can raise their awareness, because as Albert Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So, you know, we need to help other people raise their consciousness so that we can all join New Earth, be a part of the change we want to see in the world, right? There's not enough action taking place. There's not enough people realizing that the government are psychopathic. Nothing good has come of them, and we're just going backwards. So we need to be the government. We need to be the ones that we've been waiting for. We need to, I'd say that we need to do that relatively fast based on the way that things are going at the moment. But, you know, nature doesn't rush, yet everything is accomplished, as Lao Tzu said. So perhaps we just need to relax more. Perhaps we just need to be a little bit more chilled. But also, we do have to balance that out with action. Because remember, the law of attraction only works by, at least in this physical reality, by us following through with our desires, right? It's no good just sort of desiring certain things. That's definitely the first port of call. But if you don't follow up and actually take actions, mostly inspired action, then where do we go, you know? So anyway, newearth.land, I don't want this video to go on for too long. To be a part of the change you want to see in the world, decommodifying shelter, energy, food and water, making these things basic human rights. That's what we need to do first and foremost, I feel. And then, you know, at that point, we can start liberating people one by one from this insanity and balance out some socialist principles with some capitalist principles, and we'll be on a much loftier path towards source, back to our initial spiritual abode. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Do check out some of the videos on this channel, and yeah, do subscribe. It's going to take me a long time to reach people, unfortunately, because of the way it is at this time. You know, there's a lot of censorship. There's only so many things you can say, and you're going to get shadow banned. You're going to get like just deleted. And you know, fortunately for me, I wasn't a scientist throughout the height of insanity a couple of years ago, in which case, you know, you could actually get killed. So you know, we have to now honour all those people who have fought really hard for us, and we need to stay strong. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks very much for hanging out with me in this cave, and I'll see you in the next video.